Hello, friends. Shua Lake right here, and today I'm going to have a courageous conversation. I've been talking a lot about having courageous conversations with people who ask me questions, and also a little bit across social media based on the questions I've gotten. Also, some things that people want me to talk about. But today I wanted to actually invite a very good friend of mine who is a licensed marriage family therapist to join me on this discussion, open discussion about racism, how it impacts family life, and also we'll be touching on racial trauma. So without further ado, I'll let my friend Ivy introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me on here, Shu. My name is Ibi I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I am so excited to be here and have this courageous discussion with Shu.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so for being here. I know you and I, we love doing this. We love chatting on all these topics and we have so much fun. So if we get carried away, you've been warned. We're passionate about the things we do. We're passionate about these topics and also just passionate about helping others, live fulfilling lives. So when you hear the word racism, what comes to mind for you, Ivy?
Racism for me has several layers, but from personal experience, racism is the woman who doesn't want you to play with her daughter because you're different. Racism is the woman who gets up when you sit on the bus next to her. And these are things that have happened to me. Racism is the college professor who looks at you and starts to tell you everything that he believes about Africa and starts to tell you everything that he knows you will never achieve.
Mm,
Racism is the man who refuses to hire you because you are Nigerian. These are all things that have happened to me.
real
Uh,
life people, real life.
oh, yeah, these are real life things. Racism is also the woman who doesn't say she's racist, but behind closed doors, she tells her family something different and is saying, maybe you don't want to hang out with her. So it's
Mm,
many different layers, many
yeah.
different layers. People being biased without getting to know you.
Yes, yes. And you bring a good point there. Not we're not just talking here from a professional background, like you said, she's a licensed marriage and family counselor. I'm a trauma professional. Yes, we're bringing a clinical um, brains to this, but also we're also bringing a whole selves. All of us are here, both as mom, as woman, as African American woman. If you want, we call ourselves African. Oh, we live in America, and we are American in many ways, but we love our African roots. So we come as Black people, as Black moms raising Black kids in a very white society, and trying to again, knowing that we see our place on this planet, on this earth, in this place, in this
Yeah.
space, and we bring all of us at the table with every session we have with our clients, every place we go to speak, every place we go to train, but we also see the impact of it. And I like how you shared personal example, because sometimes people think because because the professions that we have, that we don't deal with it. We had it. Yeah, yeah. We deal with it. And I can add my own list to it. Like, many
Right.
people don't even know that actually my family moved last November. So we were living somewhere else, and where we always been, the minority of the minorities, and it didn't bother us because I personally was raised by a white mother, and it didn't. And so from growing up, I was used to diversity.
Right.
Um, both in Africa and here. So she raised me, and in so many ways, people say that I'm more white than I am Black. And we don't. We also we that brings another point, that racism is not always white people against Black. No, I feel sometimes I get the backlash from my own people saying that I speak too white, or I act too white. But then also, as presenting as a Black woman, I also been in places where that I wasn't welcome. Although, like I said, I lived in a very white community,
Yeah.
many years, and it never bothered me, never bothered my kids. Once we moved, so we lived in the community for like 12 years or so, and we went to a church that was primarily white, and it didn't bother us, because for us it was community. It was,
Right.
we belonged. We felt like we belonged, and we were accepted and loved just at equal level. And then I had my health issue. I needed to be on a one floor living space, so we moved to a place that was accessible, physically accessible.
Yeah.
I could move around the house with no issue. But then I couldn't move outside of my house with no issue. Everywhere we went, whether it was at the school, not at church. Church was always welcoming for sure. But my kids had stuff happen at school. We've been targeted every time something happened in that community. It was a development. Every time something happened there, my kids were always included as part of it. Sometimes they were blamed for things they didn't even do.
Wow.
And I have mentioned that over and over again, trying to advocate. And it's like we kept getting notices about things that we had to repair, things we broke. Like sometimes I wasn't even sure if the actual neighbors were complaining or just the person that was there didn't like us. I got to the point, I'm like, wow, all my years of living in the US, all my years of, growing up in white communities, I never felt, I never felt this way. This is the first time in my whole life that I felt like I didn't belong. People didn't want us there. And they did every little thing to make us leave. And as much as I want to stay in the area, we tried, we couldn't find anything. And the last draw, when we were looking, my son was, having a few things happening at school here and there. I'm like, oh, maybe just little kids or kids. And the last draw, my kids were playing in the playground. And here comes a boy that he wasn't even talking to. He was not in his way. This boy just pushed my kid on the floor and kicked him in the private.
Oh, wow.
Brings me, it still bothers me. Like, honestly, I have like goosebumps right now. And that was the last draw. I'm like, as much as I'm here, I advocate for unity, I advocate for inclusion, but my kids' safety will come first.
Absolutely. All the time.
So we were forced to move because of the way we've been treated in the area. So now we moved in an area which is still quite remote, but we're close, like 10 minutes away from a more diverse in the community. And I remember the first time my kids, we went to the local Walmart. We walked in and they saw, Black people, they saw Hispanic. They're just like, oh my goodness, where all the people come from, because again, we were so used to being the only minority everywhere we went.
Right.
So it was nice to see that. So I share all that to say that there is, like you just said, there's so many, racism is a spectrum and it manifests itself in so many ways. Right? And it could be just that person like always, giving you a hard time at work for no reason. It's like, how come everybody gets away with whatever they're doing, but then when it's me, it's a problem, even when I don't do anything wrong.
Yes.
Right? And sometimes it's a person, might be in the community that always, when always gives you kind of the look. There's actually a video right now on YouTube. I shared it. I don't know if you saw on Facebook. I shared it. Actually, just called The Look. It's like a maybe 2-minute video of this guy that, African American man, everywhere he went, people looked at him when he played with his kid. And if it was just weird. And then at the end, they show what he actually does for profession. He's a judge. And when he got into court, everybody stands up for him because the judge entered the room. And that's what gives me chills. So like we look at people as different and we don't always see them as people, as the value they bring to the table, as just human beings. I don't care if you think they don't have any values.
Right.
So anyway, we can go on and on. But with that in mind, so knowing that racism has different layers and it's it's a spectrum, how do we deal with this in our own homes? And I think that's where your expertise comes in.
Yes. So it starts with the parent or the guardian, whoever is raising the kids. I always say, learn about your history. Learn about your history, because when you learn about your history, you will find stories of resiliency, you'll find stories of strength, you'll find stories of courage, and hold on to those positive parts. I know a lot of times we think about, slavery and we're like, well, I don't see strength in that. There was strength in that because these enslaved people, many of them, all of them, they went through just unspeakable trauma and they were still able to make it. So that's where you find the strength. There are many, many stories of enslaved people doing all types of courageous things. And even when we move past slavery, learn about your grandmothers and your grandfathers and your aunties and your uncles and the wonderful things that they have done. Teach your kids about their history as well. Teach them to embrace themselves. Teach them to embrace who they are. Surround yourself with people who also look like you. So of course, I'm not saying don't embrace diversity, but in the storybooks that you're reading to your kids every day, right? Are there Black people in there? Are there brown people in there? Or are there only white people in there? The dolls that your daughters are playing with, are they only white dolls or are they Black? Are they brown? Are they all different colors of the rainbow? The TV that you're watching, how do they portray people who look like you? It's very, very important. Are they always portrayed in low positions? Are they always portrayed as violent? Even the news that you're watching every day, the kids see that. Are they always looking at the Black people as people who are being, arrested or what? So all of these things are very important. And also within your home, how do you speak about people that look different from you? It's very important because even as Black people, it's still not okay to constantly be saying negative things about people who look different than us. So it's very, very important. Who do you invite into your home? Do they only look like you, or is it diverse? When your kids are playing on the street, do you unconsciously steer them towards the people who are brown, or are you allowing them to find unity? So these are very important things. And having open discussions with your kids as well, because some kids are being raised to be openly racist and to say things. Like you said, your son was kicked and pushed. That's harassment. So having that open space to be able to have those conversations with your kids, checking in with them. I mean, I'm not saying say to them, is there racism in your school? You don't have to be that blatant about it. But tell me about who you talked to today. Who did you have lunch with today? Who did you sit with today? Did anybody cry in school today? These are subtle ways of trying to figure out what's going on. What do you enjoy about school? What do you not enjoy about school? So see how I'm not leading them. I'm not saying, do you hate your school? Are people mean to you? I'm not leading them. We're just having open discussions, you know? And if your child is being targeted, you have to be the advocate, right? You have to be the advocate. I've seen too many parents say, well, you better march up to that school tomorrow and fight the child. Well, no. How is that going to help racism? You are the advocate. You are the one who has to go and talk to the principal. Take it above the principal's head if you need to, because your child now understands that although the world, not everybody in the world might love me or like me, my mom or my dad, my grandma, whoever is raising me has my back. And that's very important for emotional safety, knowing that there's that love and belonging within your home.
I'm here nodding. I'm like, I agree with everything you say. Yes, it's important for kids to know where we came from, to know our history. And this is not just because we're Black. I mean, if you're from Poland, I mean, think about
Yeah,
America, there's no true American, right?
yeah,
So share that history with your family, with your kids. We came from England, we came from Poland, from
yeah,
Germany, wherever your family came from. And share not just from your immediate family, where the grandma, grandpa came from, but
right.
even farther down, some centuries ago. Like, how did even they say we came from Germany. How did people from Germany start coming to the U.S. and why did they start coming? If you think about all immigrants in this
We're
country,
all immigrants.
all
Yes.
of us. So when you think, so starting there, then the history is important. But then from that historical point of view, also telling your kids that just because that's what happened back then, some things have changed. Not
Yes.
everything as bad as it was then. Things are not perfect. I know that. But some things have changed. And then also how you as a family can be that advocate of change. And as you say, it starts by embracing everyone. Yes, know your heritage, know where you come from, know where you stand, but then be open to everyone, and so it's not, and I like what the example you gave about the toys your kids play with, read the books they read, the TV show that they watch. Because think about it, if you don't see yourself in those things, you never see that you belong in this world, if that makes sense. Right? And often when I do inclusion and diversity training for agencies, I said, look at your website, look at your manuals, look at the signs you have on your wall, the pictures you have on your wall in your offices. Do your employees or your clients see themselves in there? If they don't, then you're not inclusive. I don't care what you're putting on paper. I don't care what you're saying with your mouth. If people cannot see themselves in your space, you're sending the message that you don't belong here.
Absolutely.
Right. So it's same thing. And then especially because in the market saturated, with things that are, Caucasian, and that's how it's been, but it's changing, right? We have Moana, we have, we have what's the Princess Tiana, Princess and the Frog.
Yes.
So there's all these things that,
Yes.
that are changing. And then embrace that. And it's not always because, oh my goodness, it's a new Black movie that came out. No, it's showing your kids that we can make a difference.
Absolutely.
Things have been a certain way for so long, but there is change coming and we can be part of that change. And even when you're part of that change, it's not you're changing to say like here we are. No, it changes because like here we are, all of us, we all belong. And from that from that sense of belonging and unity, then we all work together again to make this earth a better place. But I
Yes.
also think along this line what you said, like with a mom or dad or a grandpa or uncle goes and advocates for a kid, that shows them that you matter to me, and you matter enough that I can go and advocate, for change at this level. I
Yeah.
think, but also in a home, it breaks my heart when I see how many of us were raised. A lot of African American people are now raised, to know that they matter. It's
Yeah.
not that it didn't matter, just like that was not the language that was shared.
Right.
Some people, I have people I hear say, I never heard anybody tell me they love me until we were so old and we moved to a different country, right?
Wow.
Sometimes it's all cultural, But
Yes.
just as much as we accept our culture, and like I love my African roots, not all African roots are beautiful to keep. You
No.
know, no, you know. So you have to as you grow in your own family to identify one what are our personal family values. What are we
Yes.
going to cultivate? Right, and then starting from there, and then you help your kids grow from there, and then as they grow they can develop more values of their own.
Yes.
But definitely helping them from the get-go at home, know that they matter, that they're important, that they're loved, that they're
Yes.
accepted. That not only just boosts their self-esteem for that, but at the end of the day is that no matter what they're dealing with outside there, they
Yeah.
know that they have a place where they belong, a place they can come back and talk to you about it. Think
Yes.
about my own son. It's like if he didn't know that he was, that he was valued, what happened at school would have just been the end of him, like, on so many ways.
You
And
wouldn't
he's
even
already a middle child, and middle childs are very sensitive to begin with. So he was distraught. Like he cried and cried, and rightfully so. And that
know.
another point. Many times we tell our black brothers like, you can't cry, don't cry like a girl, right? You have to tough it out. No, it's
No.
okay to let your sons cry.
Yes.
So it all of those, it shows them that you accept it here no matter how you show up,
Yes.
and that builds them from the ground up. Those are the kids, if they're raised in those safe homes where they feel loved and accepted no matter what, they have now the strength to be resilient when they go out there.
Yes.
Because as much as we're advocating for all of this, as much we're doing our part to make this earth a better place, I think that as long as we live in this fallen world, that the world will never going to be perfect. They're always going to, each one of us, we're going to have our turn, or with trials and tribulation of some kind,
Yes.
right? But if you don't have that great foundation that sustains you, then you'll be crumbling every time something comes your way, every
That's true.
time someone says something to you. And something with my kids alone, I think my two boys, they're 6 and 8, so they love to pick at each other, right? So sometimes you always see something like, I can't think of anything right now. But he'll be mad at his brother and say, "I'll move over there, you twit," or something like that. Like he makes up words. Um, and one time he actually called him a girl, and then my 8-year-old is like, distraught. Yeah, he's emotional, and he goes, "He called me a girl. I'm not a girl." So I looked at him, I'm like, give him the space to vent and get it out and get his tears out, his frustration out. And
Right.
then I was like, "Okay, are you ready to talk now?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm ready." And he sort of catch his breath. I said, "Okay, now, are you a girl?" And he did not see that coming. It just caught him off guard. And he's like, "No, I'm not." I said, "Okay, if you know that you're not a girl, does it matter who calls you a girl? You can
Right.
brush it off easily and faster because you know that's not who you are. If
Exactly.
somebody today calls me a liar or a thief, I know I'm not.
Right. Yes.
It wouldn't hurt me as much because I know who I am. So
Yes.
we have to start building our children and our loved ones' identity, you know, at home. That core, they need to know who they are, no matter what happens to them. Because at the end of the day, it's not the color of your skin, it's not your degrees, it's not the profession you have, it's who you are at the core.
That is
And
true.
that's what we need to build for our kids.
Yeah. Yeah. Having family conversations is very important.
Mhm.
Sitting the children down and really establishing those values and what you stand for as a family. And now it's not just about teaching them to be reactionary. So, what do you do if somebody says this? Which I think is
Mhm.
very
Mhm.
important. We have to talk
Mhm.
about racism. We have to talk about bullying. We have to talk about unkindness. We have to talk about mean words, all of these things. But
Mhm.
we also need to teach them how to treat other people. On the
Mhm.
playground, how do you share? How do you welcome the new child into your school? How do you eat lunch with other people? What do you do when somebody is different? And different can be anything. It's not just skin color. These are continuous conversations that we have to have with our kids over and over and over again because we must build resiliency. It's very important. The world is not necessarily the most kind place, right? Some people are going to be very kind, some people are going to be very mean. And we have to really point to our children so that they know who they are. They're filled with self esteem. So that even
Mhm.
when somebody is mean or when somebody says to them, "I'm not going to give you a job," that sentence will not completely break them down. They will say,
Mhm.
"You know what? That's fine because I don't want to work for a racist boss anyway. Let me go find a job somewhere else, or let me go create my own job so that I can actually have inclusivity." When
Yes.
somebody says, "I don't want to date you because of the way you look," you say, "You know what? That's fine because I don't want to date you either. Because if you're that shallow, then I don't
Mhm.
want to be around you." And then
Yes.
you go on and go find somebody who is actually worthy of you and all your talents and your gifts. So
Mhm.
resiliency is very important. We cannot overly shelter our children.
Mhm. Mhm.
Cannot overly shelter them. let them know some of the things that are going on in the world, of course at an age appropriate level,
Mm-hmm.
but also teach them what should happen when the world is unkind, and let them know the world will be unkind sometimes, but here's what you
Mm-hmm.
do, here's what you say, come talk to me about it. And you
Mm-hmm.
also watch your reaction, when there's injustice going on around your children. How is your reaction? Are you fighting and kicking and screaming? Because that could be terrifying to a child. Or are you doing what you had mentioned, let them cry, let them breathe, and then calm down and walk them through the steps,
Mm-hmm.
building their emotional intelligence. It's very, very important,
Mm-hmm.
because your kids are not going to live with you for the rest of your life, right? They're not going to be with you forever. So you want a situation such that when they've left you, they're able to use those critical thinking skills. He just called me a girl. Yes, that hurt my feelings, but I know I'm not a girl. So why am I even upset again? I know I'm not a girl. I know who I am. I'm not a girl. Okay, whatever. And then I'm just going to move on. So
Mm-hmm.
teaching them critical thinking skills, building up their self-esteem is very, very important.
Mm-hmm.
Listening to them when a child is coming to you crying and saying that they're hurt. Don't say to them, don't cry. Because what you're
Mm-hmm.
doing is you're telling them their emotions are not important, that they are not important.
Mm-hmm.
The world sometimes tells people who are different that they're not important. So you can't be giving them that same narrative. You
Mm-hmm.
have to let them know all of their feelings are important, whether it's anger, whether it's sadness, whether it is disappointment, all feelings are important. And then
Yeah.
teach them how to handle those feelings appropriately.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. So I guess the last point here I want us to kind of talk about is this idea of racial trauma. So sometimes when I bring it up, people are like, well, that person did not, didn't experience racism. So what make you think that they're traumatized, right?
Mhm.
And sometimes, and it goes, you and I can talk about this whole generational thing, from a family system focus, right? But and I think, even for everyone, whether you've been trained in this or not, but
Yeah.
still seeing like what people are experiencing right now is deeper than what people are presenting, sorry, right
Mhm.
now is deeper than actually what they're feeling and what they've been through, even though they have not been through personally. Right. So
Yes.
I'll let you share a little bit about that from the family perspective. Like, how have you seen that even manifest in with your own clients?
Yes.
Someone who maybe seems like they have it all together, the life is well, nothing is bothering them, but they're dealing with some trauma that they didn't even experience directly.
Right. So I think when we think about trauma, we often think that something has to happen to you directly for you to have a trauma experience. But
Mm-hmm.
that's not true. We're finding that you can have vicarious trauma. So that means I watched your trauma. And
Mm-hmm.
because of that connection, we're all connected as humans, right? We're all connected. And because of that connection, I now start to show symptoms. I
Mm-hmm.
begin to be hypervigilant, watching, thinking about your safety. I begin to have bad dreams or difficulty sleeping or sadness, tearfulness, symptoms of depression. That is racial trauma. Racial trauma could be the idea of, you had mentioned something about, in your old neighborhood, there was this feeling of we don't belong here. That can be a very traumatizing experience, right? Because every human being wants to belong. It's a basic human need. Every human being needs to feel safety, right? Safety is a basic need. It's a basic need and is non-negotiable. So you're walking through the world and you feel like, not everybody really accepts me. Or you're in your office, you're the only one, and you're always having to perform. There's this thing when you're a minority where in certain spaces you perform a different way because you don't want to be too black or too Hispanic, too
Mm-hmm.
anything. You're always kind of dulling yourself a little bit, always kind of holding your breath a little bit. So you can't
Mm-hmm.
fully just be yourself in the world. That is a form of trauma, always almost pretending to be somebody that you're not. Or you hear people making comments black people, about black people's hair, about black people's skin color, about black people's names, about black people's shows, black music, black
Mm-hmm.
this, black that. And you can't always necessarily interject and maybe defend yourself. So it's walking through the world feeling like, I don't quite belong in these spaces. Or as a child, from when you were little, you've never actually seen black people in positions of power, you
Mm-hmm.
know? You're only ever being told, oh, be quiet, or people can't pronounce your name, or people. So it's little things that happen throughout your life. And then finally, you see this video of a man being killed before your very eyes.
Mm.
And everything that you have been suppressing for the last 10 years, 20, 30, 60 years just boils up, right? It was a metaphor for what a lot of people had been feeling. I am trying to be seen. I am trying to be heard. I am crying out for help. I'm looking for an ally, but nobody is here helping me. And that is why we're seeing people breaking down. It's
Mm-hmm.
everything that you have felt all of your life that you have suppressed, because you have to suppress it so that you can function in society. You can't be crying every day. You have
Mm-hmm.
to work, you have to go to school, you have to take care of family, you have to take care of kids, you have to function in society. So you suppress, 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 suppress. And now I think it's been a pressure cooker. The
Yes.
emotions are spilling out and they're coming out. I'm seeing people going into depression right now. I'm seeing people actually having symptoms of trauma. Even people who haven't even watched the video, you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
like actual symptoms of PTSD. I'm seeing that coming out right now because it's traumatizing to your mind. You know, with trauma, it feels like you're in a dark hole and you're asking people to help you, but people are just walking by. People walk by. People walk by. That's
Mm-hmm.
what trauma is.
Yes, yes. Oh, yeah, that's a perfect illustration at the end there. And I think for all of us listening, I mean, I do trauma work. I can go talking more 2 hours around this, but I think what you said at the end is probably a call to action for all of us.
Yeah.
People are feel like they're in the dark hole, and you can't just keep going around and around. You need to stop and ask, "How are you? How can
Yes.
I support you?"
Right.
Not what's wrong with you. Ask them what
No.
happened to you.
Yes.
Yeah. And because sometimes like you said, it's not something that happened to them directly, but
Right.
it's things that they seen or heard. But also I think about kids who, like, I didn't see the video of that you and I are talking about, the death of George Floyd and all that. Because I know I couldn't take it. Although I do trauma work, I have to limit and preserve. Like you said, I have to function, right? So I knew to kind of safeguard myself that way. But even
Yeah.
just hearing about it, reading the article, I read the article way like weeks later because I needed time to just let that sink in. I guess that this happened and all of that. And it's not just for this person. I guess people go in all different tangent about what happened there. But I
Right.
think in general, it's like people are hurting in so many levels. And
Yes.
instead of you just walking around because they're functioning, because they're coming to work, you
Right.
just walking around their circle and pretending that, one, you don't see them. That's
Yeah.
not the right thing. And pretend that you see them, but you don't want to understand. That's not helpful.
Mhm.
you know so if unless that's actually how you feel, then don't volunteer to engage in what we're advocating for here. But we want all of people who are willing to do this, to promote inclusion, promote unity and love, to actually take this a step farther. Be intentional about who's around you. Be inclusive in all that you do, whether it's at work, at church, your community. Make sure that you are promoting inclusion at all levels. And when you do see that person that is looks different or acts different or dressed different, that's
Yeah.
that's kind of in their own little corner there, be the one that's inviting them. And if
Yes.
they say no, be the one asking them, like, how can we support you? How is it anything we can make better, we can do better? Because you never know. It might not be you, but it might be somebody else in your circle that heard this person. It might be,
Yes.
maybe it was a story that was told to them, from the great grandmothers, that lived in that community and how they were treated.
Right.
You never know what people are carrying with them on their shoulders.
Yeah.
So be willing to stop and just
Right.
say, "Hey, how are you doing? How can I support you today?"
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you know the person or not. But that kind of opens up the conversation for inclusion, opens a conversation for mutual support. And
Yeah.
even if you ask that question, someone answers and you're like, "I don't know how to do that." It's okay to say, "I don't know how to do that. Can you help me? Like, where do I start?"
Yes.
It's okay to say you don't know. It's okay to say, "I don't understand." But
Right.
and that being an ally doesn't mean that you get it. Being an
No.
ally just means that you are willing to support that person.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
And that's, I think that's where it starts. Anything else you want to add here before we close up?
Yes. So there is another piece of intergenerational trauma, right? It's the idea that sometimes trauma is passed down. But really what that means is when a person has gone through multiple traumas, it changes their behavior, it changes the way they operate in the world. And so then when they have children, they are raising children based on a different operation. They're almost a different person. And then
Mm-hmm.
they pass those behaviors down to their children. And sometimes when you've been through trauma, you might go ahead and traumatize somebody else. And it's not 100%. It's not everybody who's been through trauma goes ahead and does something. But sometimes, you act because of the trauma, out of the pain. And then you have children, you raise them based on that pain. Those children then now have pain. They raise their children in pain, and it trickles down. So when Shu is talking about, be careful of the way you behave around people or how you talk to people, because you don't know what they're carrying around, right? Sometimes it's one little thing, one little joke that you say to someone, and they just snap because they've been carrying around pain. And last thing I want to say is, let's also be careful about the way we joke and we play around, even behind closed doors, right? Because the kids are listening. So what kinds of statements and jokes do you make about people who are different, right? And different by not even racially different, just different in every possible way. Are you making comments about them? Are you saying nasty things about them? The shows that you're watching, are they making mean comments about a certain section of the population? So being very careful about that, because what you take into your mind, after a while, you become that thing. So just be careful, filter what you're reading and what you're watching and all of these things. It's very, very important.
Yeah. And when you are watching those videos or those shows that making fun of people are different, speak up about it. Like in even when we're in community with, in public with my kids, if I see something that's not appropriate, and sometimes it could be, you see a couple and then one is yelling at the other in public, or it's something that's just like, that's not how you treat someone else. I will speak up for my kids. I might not all depend on my kids. I'm not going to get in the middle of a fight and then do something like trying to get hurt. But I have called 911 before, if I see something that's so inappropriate. And again, I'm a mandated reporter, and I often say, even if I wasn't, I'll still report stuff, because I want the earth to be a safe place. But also, like, even if something we're watching TV, a commercial comes up and something that's just not appropriate, I tell my kids, that's not how we act, and this is why we don't do that. And then, like you said, having those conversations is very important. As things come up, don't just wait when things go wrong to be like, oh, this is what we should have done. No, be proactive. I'm a big advocate of making every moment a learning moment. Every moment. And sometimes when my daughter will listen, she's a teenager, of course, she's like, oh, my mom, please stop. She's like, I'm not a client. I'm like, too bad. You're stuck with mom who's a therapist. But it's kind of, it's not just because I'm a therapist. I think if I wasn't, I think like the life has so much to teach us. And if you always sit your kids down and lecture them, that might not always go too well. So if a thing comes up and you're making a conversation, they absorb it so well. And even my daughter says it now because she probably already heard it. She's 14. So I've been dealing with her this way for 14 years. So she's like, okay, can you just talk to the boys? I know this already, So, and it's okay. There's times I have conversations just with my boys, and that's okay. But I think all of us need to start speaking about it. Having these courageous conversations, just like we did right now. And some of you might be like, oh yeah, my goodness, this is so good. It's so true. And I'll, change X, Y, and Z, do something different.
Yeah.
And some of you will be like, oh my goodness, this is just out there. I don't even know where to start. And that's okay too. We appreciate all of you listening. And I want you just as we close here, from based on what we have said, everything you've heard here, what's one thing that you will do differently? Because before we can change the world out there, we have to change ourselves first. What's one thing that you can do differently moving forward? Post in the comments. We'll make sure we read it, and I'll share with Ibi as well. And I will also post Ibi's contact info here. If your family is, if you need to work with family therapists, have some family stuff going on, deal with the generational stuff. Ibi is she's a great clinician. Not because she's my friend, yes, I'm biased, but she's really good. So you better go check out, go connect with her. And, and both of us are open to doing trainings, virtually. And, we don't live in the same state. So if you need something in person, she might be able to do something in person closer to her. But we're both open to virtual trainings and workshops and things like that. So again, that's all I got for today. But I think it starts with us. All of us can make a difference. Yes. Anything else, Ibi?
Yes, just one final thing, Shu. I just created it's a free guide, a free ebook. And it's 5 steps to managing anxiety and fear. Because right now I'm seeing a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear and worry going on. So, I'll give Shu the link so that you guys can download it, and it will just take you through 5 simple steps, and you can create an action plan for yourself, an anxiety and fear action plan.
Yes, yes. And I encourage you, not yes, do it for yourself, but also do it for your family.
Yes.
Like my kids and I use a lot of the tools that I use with my own clients. So we'll, things like that, I might do for myself first, and then start implementing like, hey, this is something I'm working on. Let's do it together. Like, and walk your kids through those steps, walk your coworkers through those steps. If you're leadership, walk your staff through those steps. Because in healing and wellness, it's for all of us. But
Yes.
again, we have to take action in order to see change.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much, my friend. Love you so dearly. And yeah, we'll definitely, you've been on the show before and we'll keep having this conversation as things come up. But have a blessed day. And for everyone listening, we want to hear your comments below. The first question we asked was, when you hear the word racism, what comes to mind? And number two is, based on what we talked about today, what's one thing you can do differently?
Mhm.
All right.
Thank you so much for having me on, Shu.
Yeah, so no problem. Anytime, right? We love having these conversations. All right. Bye, everyone.